Welcome. It's Charter Local Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance, and we are literally in the Capitol today in Washington, D.C. We are joined by Jim McGovern. He is a member of the United States Congress representing the great state of Massachusetts. And, sir, I'd like to speak with you about the conflict in the Middle East. The president recently said that there was not necessarily a clear plan as it relates to ISIS, ISIL. We're not sure what to call it. What is your sense of the tumult in that region?
Well, it's a very chaotic region, a very dangerous region, but I think the president accurately summarized U.S. policy, which is we don't have a clear strategy. We don't know, quite frankly, what our clearly defined mission is, which has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
And why is that? Is that the fault of the administration? Is that the fault of circumstance? I mean, literally, we're not fighting a nation, we're fighting a group?
Well, you know, all of those things are responsible. I mean, the White House, has tried to flesh out a clear strategy. Congress has refused to debate or vote on any kind of a strategy. We're abrogating our constitutional responsibilities. But, the nature of the conflict is constantly changing. Look, this is complicated.
It is.
And, my critique of kind of what we're doing is it's kind of the same old, same old. Bomb, more troops, more war. When the reality is that the only way you're going to stop all this is to try to get everybody to learn to live with each other over there.
And let's talk about Congress's role. As we know, pursuant to the Constitution, pursuant to the War Powers Act, Congress is supposed to be the entity that declares war. Right. We're at a place now where it's not really clear if we're operating under the war declarations of the early part of the century, but what we do know is that the president has submitted an authorization of use of military force proposal, right. AUMF as we know it. We know that was submitted in February. Mm-hmm. We know that the speaker has indicated that he's not interested in voting on it, or he thinks he wants a different one. What's going on this front?
I think what's going on is cowardice, to be very blunt. The only reason why we're not debating and voting on it is because it's a tough subject and it's a tough vote. I think there are a lot of people here who wrongly voted for the first Iraq
right.
war, who feel a little bit burned and would rather not have to vote for any more wars. And it's a lot easier for a member of Congress to sit on the sidelines and critique what's going on and say more of this or less of this.
Well, but Congress seems to be very concerned about getting involved in the Iran negotiation.
Right.
They want to participate in that in a very significant way, yet Congress does not seem to be as interested in the ISIS situation.
Well, and the ironic thing is not just Congress wanting to get more involved in the Iran negotiations, but Congress complains about the White House acting alone on so many international and domestic issues routinely. They complain when the president uses executive orders to do things. And yet, when it comes to war, Congress is AWOL. We don't want to do anything. And look, I think if we're not going to have the guts to debate this and to help kind of formulate a strategy, then why are we deploying thousands of American men and women in a part of the world that is very, very dangerous? And why are we, we are borrowing about $3.5 million an hour right now to fight in Iraq and Syria. $3.5 million an hour we are borrowing. That's going to go up as our troops expand and our military mission gets more intense. I think due to the cost and due to the fact that we are putting Americans in harm's way, Congress ought to be talking about this every week. I mean, this is something that's really important. And to those, who are a little bit more skeptical about war, and I'm glad that they are, those who mistakenly voted for the Iraq war to begin with, bring that skepticism to this debate. I mean, challenge what the administration is doing, challenge what people are saying, and try to, and so that we don't make the same mistakes.
As I understand it, you're a proponent of withdrawing.
Well,
from the region, is that fair?
Yeah, well, I'm not an isolationist, but I don't believe that expanding our military footprint is going to solve anything. And, I heard General Allen the other day talk about, when asked how long we're going to be there.
Right.
I mean, back in July and August, we were told maybe a couple of years, Now he's saying a generation or two or more. Well, there's a big difference between a couple of years and generations. And I think this is an important moment for Congress to debate whether or not we want to do that. And what is the clearly defined mission? I wonder how does this end? I mean, what is the? I mean, we could have tens of thousands of troops in that region. We could bomb every day. And I guess you could say we could defeat ISIS on the battlefield, on a daily basis.
Right.
But we're not changing anything.
So, in your mind, what should be the clearly defined mission? What should the end game be?
The end game should be to control, the kind of proliferation of a really rotten group of people,
right.
But also to try to encourage a political settlement, to a conflict, internally that's been going on for centuries. We went in to Iraq and we toppled Saddam Hussein, who was a Sunni who treated the Shiites terribly. Right. Okay, now we toppled Saddam Hussein. We purged all the Sunnis out of the government, right? And now we have we put in place a Shiite who hated the Sunnis and did what Saddam Hussein did, but in reverse. And corrupt government, a brutal government. Nothing that improved the life for all people.
Is it time, and let's focus on Iraq and
right.
then we'll go to Syria, is it time to look at a division of the country as what happened in Yugoslavia?
Yeah, well, look, I think ultimately the people who are in the region are going to have to make their own decisions about what they want to do. And the people of Iraq ought to figure out what they want to do in Iraq, and the countries in the region ought to have more skin in the game. Mm-hmm. This not ought to be something that
right.
the United States is directing. But I mean, I think the question for people is going to be, it has to be, can we get along? And if not, do we need to separate?
And then when we look at Syria, I mean, Bashar al-Assad, this is not a good man, and that's not me speaking.
Right.
I'm less than an expert. And yet, we seem to be unable to decide whether he's for us or against us, or we're for him or against him.
Well, that's another example of kind of a fuzzy strategy. I'm not sure, are we trying to topple Assad, or are we trying to just weaken him? And if we want to get rid of him, who are we going to put in his place? We're now arming and training, opposition leaders, some of whom have pretty lousy human rights records.
Right.
So their name may not be the same as the current leader of Syria, but if they became, in a position to assume power, they might be every bit as brutal. It reminds me of that book we read when we were kids, the Dr. Seuss book, Cat in the Hat. They clean up, they make a mess, they clean it up, it gets a bigger mess. They try to clean that mess up, it gets bigger. And I think that's kind of what I think is happening in this part of the world.
I remember a few years ago, the halcyon days of the Arab Spring. Mm-hmm. Has the spring turned into just a brutal cold winter?
I think the spring hasn't delivered the way I think a lot of us had hoped. Look, it's a complicated region. There are ethnic and religious divides that go back centuries. I mean, there's nothing easy about this. On the other hand, I think we have had some experience with the military solutions mm-hmm.
For
quite some time now. I mean, I don't think Iraq is any better today, than it was when Saddam Hussein was president. I mean, the violence is worse. The economy's a mess. And now a vacuum has been created where a group like ISIL has come
right.
in, taking advantage of it. I think we need to kind of figure out what do we want to see happen. And I would like to think that what we want to see happen is we want to encourage stability. We want to encourage respect for human rights. And we want to encourage, a better future for all the people in that part of the world. I mean, none of us would want to live in a country or tolerate a country with that level of violence. But it requires kind of imaginative thinking, outside the box thinking, and not just the same old, same old. Yeah, I mean, we have the greatest military in the world. We could be there forever and try to keep the status quo.
We could have been Vietnam forever.
Right. Well, and look we've been in Japan forever, right? We're in Germany forever.
His name is Jim McGovern.
Right.
He is a member of the U.S. Congress. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is Charter Local Edition.